Change begins from within. As easy as it is to look outside of ourselves and want the world to change, the truth is, it never will if we remain the same. This podcast was created for changemakers like you who want more love and connection in your community. Today, you are going to hear stories that will inspire you and also challenge you to be the change. We are going to go deep, my friend. So take a deep breath and settle in. My name is Emilia Tamburini. Welcome to the Circle of Change. Hello, dear soul. Thank you for joining us today in Circle. This episode is another soul-nourishing conversation with lots of great reminders and tools to help us take care of ourselves on this change-making journey that we are on. We cannot hear this message enough during this season, especially. Before we dive in, I want to let you know something I haven't told anyone else. Me and the universe are creating a program for you. Actually, 2 programs. I am so excited about the immersion program and the retreat. These are my life's work to create these experiences to support you as a change maker. Just think, nourishing community, deep self-reverence, holistic leadership, everything we need as we step out and into and continue to lead in this evolution that we are in. This is me supporting you in the best way that I know how, gathering you together to guide you in conversation with yourself and with your fellow agents of change so that you can find your way while being surrounded by people who can understand your struggle, inspire new ideas, and cheer you on. Like everything I do, it's going to be deep work. And we're going to have fun along the way because no journey of evolution is worth it if there is no joy. More information to come over the next few weeks, but consider the seed planted. The topic today is so relevant for our time. We are here with Dr. Ganz Ferrance, a psychologist who is so passionate about helping leaders, especially those in the public sector, create a life that feels good as it can possibly get. He has spent much time learning from his own journey and from others who are rocking their life. And he brings all of that wisdom to his clients in one-on-one situations, workshops, and talks. If you think my voice is soothing, you are going to love Dr. Ganz's voice alongside the wisdom that he has to share. In this conversation, we explore the opportunity that is here for us in this post-pandemic era. He shares with us the system that he created to restore well-being, something he calls the me factor. He shares the key to relating with people who have challenging behavior, and gives a beautiful Old Yeller example that really illustrates what it means to be both compassionate while holding people to account. And he leaves us with 2 powerful questions to help you instantly manage your state and make decisions that are best for you. I will meet you at the end to pull out a few more nuggets, but I want to say that what I really respect about Dr. Ganz is his integrity. As he shares, you will hear that he is living what he teaches, doing work that he loves, helping others, learning and expanding his knowledge, moving his body in ways that he enjoys, and getting support in his own life process. This is leadership in action. Thank you for being here. Enjoy this conversation. Dr. Ganz, welcome to the Circle of Change. It's such an honor to have you here with me.
Thank you for inviting me, Emilia. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation for so many reasons. One, I think that the work that you're up to in the world is so needed today, and I'm sure you're seeing that as well. And so I'm delighted that you'll be able to share your wisdom with the listener who's also sitting here with us in this circle. And also, just on a personal level, I was really looking forward to this hour in my day because you have this beautiful, calm, also humorous, but just a welcoming nature. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like going to a spa for me for an hour.
I'll try to live up to those expectations, but hopefully the spa for both of us. So that's gonna be good.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll get a joint massage or something.
that's so great.
Yeah, in the hot tub. Yeah.
All right. So we always take a moment just to settle in and get present because all of us can go be in the future, in the past. And I like to invite people to be here now with us. And so feel free to participate in this as you like. So for our listener who's sitting here with us, I invite you to close your eyes if you're in a place to do that. And if not, just maybe soften your gaze. Take a big belly breath in through your nose and let out your big exhale. And I invite you to take a few more breaths. And as you do that, pay attention, just like zero in on the sound of your breath for these moments. Yeah, welcome to now. I'm going to read us a poem, so feel free to keep your eyes closed if you'd like to take this in. This poem is A Light in the Attic by Shel Silverstein from his book, A Light in the Attic. There's a light on in the attic. Though the house is dark and shuttered, I can see a flickering flutter, and I know what it's about. There's a light on in the attic. I can see it from the outside, and I know you're on the inside, looking out. I like that poem. I feel like I get it at different levels each time I read it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Ganz, welcome again.
Yeah, talk about that spa experience. I'm all relaxed now. I fall asleep on you. Hopefully not.
Perfect. Perfect. That lights me up because for somebody that does the work that you do, I think it's just so important for us, for you to find these spaces as well. And that we're practicing what we're preaching out there in the world.
Always good to do that. Yes.
Yeah. So the question I'd love to begin with is, who are you? And that can be a very deep question. You can take it wherever you want to go, but just as an opportunity for the listener to get to know you a bit more, who are you?
So yes, Ganz Ferrance. Yeah, Dr. Ganz Ferrance. So the doctor I have a PhD in psychology, and I've been in the field for just over 3 decades now, working mostly in private practice. I've worked in Canada and the US. I've done presentations and talks places other than that as well, like in the Caribbean and different places like that. Who I am, I'm a dad. I got 2 kids, both adults now. I'm a husband. I'm a brother and a son. And I'm one of those folks that I'm always intrigued in seeing, well, 2 things, I guess. One is, how good can we have it as humans? Like, I really love the whole idea of human potential. What can we learn from the people who are doing it well? I really like to study and to distill people who are happy, healthy, high performing, productive members of society. What are they doing? And let me do some of that, and I'm likely to have similar results. You know what I mean? So I'm one of those people that looks at that all the time. And then I'm also one of those folks that I really enjoy. I really get lit up when I help people grow, when I share those things that I've learned, and I can see people make these little tweaks in their life, and how that has huge benefits and huge dividends for them later on, right? Whether it's in their relationships or their physical health or just sort of their well-being. I love to do that. I think I'm a natural born teacher because my dad was a teacher, my mom was a teacher. I got sister's a word teacher. I married a teacher. So I'm surrounded. And I also taught myself at a couple of universities as well. So that's give you an overview of who I am. I also love sports. I like sports. I play a lot of basketball, but I like racket sports like tennis, racquetball, badminton, and I also have a black belt in karate.
Wow.
Big overview.
I love it. I love it. It just feels so nourishing, rewarding, the work that you must do, like just that feedback loop that I imagine that you're receiving with just showing up for people and wanting all of us to thrive and really get the best out of this lifetime.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I really feel honored by the work I've been able to do so far, and I'm looking forward to doing more in the future because I learn. As long as I've been a psychologist, I've also been seeing a psychologist, right? I've also been doing my own work and my own therapy with a few good people in my lifetime as well. And so I'm always learning. I'm learning from my psychologist, but I'm also learning from my clients. When we talk about different things, I feel very honored that I get to peek behind the curtain and see how they're thinking, the decisions they've made, and what makes them tick, as well as helping them to tick better, right? But it helps me a lot in terms of recognizing where I can make some changes, and it informs me to help other people who are going through similar issues.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big nugget right there for all of us, really, especially in these leadership positions. It's like, who are the folks that are also supporting us in those roles?
Yeah, well, it's very, very important. In the leadership position, there is so much weight on our shoulders. There's also public weight, if that makes sense. So it's like, it's not just, you have responsibility, but it's also public responsibility. People are seeing you, the people who report to you, maybe people outside the company, or maybe your kids, or whoever it is, whatever kind of leader you are. We have to figure out our own lives, but then we have to guide and support the people that we're responsible for. And so that can be quite heavy. And this no joke when I say, if I didn't do the work that I'm doing with my psychologist for all these years, I don't think I'd still be here. Like, I wouldn't be in the field. I may not be alive. Definitely wouldn't be married. So it is one of those things where we talked about walking the talk, and it is important that we walk the talk. And if I didn't have this, I wouldn't be able to be of service to people. And so it's really important. I take that very, very seriously. And I encourage other people too as well.
Yeah. That's a mic drop. I feel like we could just stop the recording and be like, okay, and that's your that's your lesson for
We're done.
today.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that. So I want to back up a little bit. I want to get into this work, and I know you talk a lot about burnout, which is kind of what we're touching on a little bit here, but I love to hear people's stories, especially, change makers like yourselves. Like, this work is a passion and it's not easy. I'm always so curious about, like, what's the life journey that led you to be doing what you're up to today?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess I'm an immigrant. I come from the Caribbean. My parents moved here when I was about three or so. So I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And so coming from the Caribbean to a nice, cool environment like Edmonton was a bit of a culture shock, weather-wise as well as other ways. But growing up as somebody who was a bit of an outsider, that was an adventure on its own. Then parents they don't always have all the tools, and so they may be well-meaning sometimes, but they don't always do everything they need to do to support you or to give you what you need, or not do things that would be damaging, right? So our home was fairly dysfunctional, a lot of stress. And so it really kind of spurred me on to figure out, okay, I'm sure there's a better way to do this. What can I learn? How can I do this better right now to survive as a kid? But more importantly, how do I not do this going forward to the people who are around me that I connect with in the future? And so I really wanted to understand that. So that was part of it. It was, kind of survival for the future. But then it was also this idea, and this is the classic Jekyll and Hyde story, right? The whole Jekyll and Hyde story is really about the scientists, the Dr. Jekyll's search for unlocking humans' massive potential. He kind of overshot, I think. And that's why we got the problems. But the idea of unlocking something huge and very powerful within us, what can we do? And there have been stories of people doing amazing things that would seem impossible, but actually happened. And I said, well, if that's possible in these unique situations, what else can we do? Or how can we come close to that on a regular basis? Maybe we don't need to be under that kind of stress, but how can we perform better than we typically do? There's lots of research and lots of examples of people doing that. And so those two things really got me interested in the field of psychology, understanding how we work and how we can do better. And so through my whole career in psychology, that's always been the theme. What can we do to improve where you are right now? A lot of times people think of psychology, well, they have some misconceptions. They think of Frasier, or at worst, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is really bad. But there's this sort of negative gearing when people think about psychology. They think about, oh, you're seeing a psychologist. Oh my goodness, what's wrong with you? But it's my approach has always been proactive. It's always been positive. What can we do wherever you start? Doesn't matter where you start. Wherever you start, how can I help you do better? And how can I help you see how far you can go in terms of how happy and how good you can have it? And that's always been my approach. It's been my approach personally. It's been my approach with the folks that I work with in my practice, as well as the coaching folks that I see now. I just want everybody to have as good as they can stand it, and even better. I want to increase your capacity to stand good in your life. So that's kind of what got me into it, and my general approach and philosophy to this.
I just got off a call that was supporting female entrepreneurs, and this woman who was speaking just spoke about kindness, a kindness approach to leadership, that we just can't get enough of that. And it is kind of a deconditioning and unconditioning from maybe older ways of being, or maybe how our society is wired. But I love everything that you're saying about how you're bringing people along on that journey.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's really encouraging to me is that the younger generations, they're much more tapped into this particular way of thinking, right? If you look at the companies with a lower age range in their employees, sure, they want to get money, they want to get paid, they want to be able to like make a living and support themselves, but it's really about quality of life. It's really about the experience. It's really about what is the mission of the company? What can they do to make a contribution, and what kind of lifestyle can they have while they're doing it? And so a lot of particularly tech companies, they're really competing for employees on the experience that the employees are going to have when they work for that company. And I think this is the wave of the future. This is where we're all going. Some of the old school types of businesses and managerial structures and stuff like that, they haven't quite caught on, but I think this is one of the, if there is a benefit of the pandemic, this is one of them, which is we're all talking about mental health and well-being and work-life balance and some of these, what we think of as softer skills or softer types of topics, much more intensely now, because we're seeing people leave their jobs. We're seeing people leave on stress leave, or change, or leave the industry altogether because they've had enough, right? Either they're burnt out, or they've realized there's a better way, or whatever it is. And so really understanding that at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, you're really not going to care that your inbox was not empty, right? You're not going to care how much money you made, or you didn't do that one deal, right? Or you didn't get that promotion. You're going to care about the stuff you didn't do to feed yourself. You're going to care about the relationships you had, the experiences you had. All that stuff is going to be really coming into sharp focus as our days wind down. Well, why not live that way now? Why not be proactive and cut out the middleman and not have to figure that out when we're 80, right? Or if we're lucky. Yeah, we can do that now and live that way going forward.
Let's talk a little bit more about what it is you're observing out there with the folks that you're working with. And I'd love to hear more too. Like, are you working with leaders, or what is a leader to you, or what's the environment you're working in? And then I know you focus on burnout. So what is it that you're actually seeing in the organizations and people you're supporting?
Yeah, I work with leaders, particularly with leaders in the public eye, because like I said before, that's extra pressure, right? When you got a lot of people looking at you and stuff, really wanting to help leaders look after themselves. Just like I have my own support, I want to make sure that the leaders have their support. I can be that, or somebody like me can be that, so that they have what they need to be their best. It's an interesting little statistic I heard. So they say that, in companies that invest $1 in mental health services or anything like that for their employees, they typically get $3 back for every dollar that's invested, right? So it's like that's a good deal, 3 ROI. But what's interesting is when you invest that same amount of money, that dollar into the leadership, your payback for the company is more like $50 or $500, right? It's very, very high because leaders have such a big impact on the culture, on the experience of their employees, and the direction of the company. And so we know in business, whether it's entrepreneurship or large business, the company tends to be a reflection of the people at the top. If they're doing well, the company tends to do well. If they're not doing well, then we got some problems, right? And so helping leaders to know, to have a system to know how to do well, how to look after themselves, because most people don't, how to look after themselves, how to keep things in balance, and how to make decisions that are longer looking and not just based on the quarterly projections, not just for the company, but also for themselves, their well-being, their families, if they got kids, their spouses, whoever. So that's kind of who I work with. And I also do workshops and talks for companies as well, talking about these types of things. But in terms of the burnout and what I've seen, it was a big deal before the pandemic. Okay. It was a really big deal before the pandemic, and it was just starting to get a little bit of traction in the public consciousness. World Health Organization, just before about a year or so before the pandemic, actually codified burnout as one of like an actual medical illness, mental and medical illness. So it can be recognized and also be compensated for. And then the pandemic hit. And so I like to say that the whole world went through a collective midlife crisis at
Mm,
that point.
yeah.
We all hit the wall. We had the crisis. We didn't know what to do with ourselves. It really had a lot of people stressed out. I mean, it's a traumatic event. There was a lot of loneliness, a lot of dysfunction that came up to the surface during that time as well. But I think there's also an opportunity, just like in the regular midlife crisis, for us to examine what it is we've done so far and if this is working for us, or if we want to tweak some stuff and do things differently going forward. And I think this is the opportunity because now we have things like, two of the big things in the news right now is something called the Great Resignation, where everybody's like resigning from their jobs or leaving the industry or whatever, sometimes retiring. And then the other one is quiet quitting, right? Where people are just kind of saying, okay, you know what? Not going to work like this anymore. I'll just do just enough so I don't lose my job. Or sometimes they'll say, well, it's a way of right sizing and getting work life balance. But both of these issues can be really problematic to industries and to employers if they don't know what to do with it, don't know how to handle them. But both of these things are a result of like a ramp up of burnout, a ramp up of stress. And you can think of burnout as basically exhaustion, not just in terms of physical exhaustion, but emotional and mental exhaustion from carrying the weight of whatever you're carrying and not having appropriate outlets to deal with that, and not knowing that if you're carrying a lot of weight on one side, to balance it out, you got to have a lot of good stuff on the other side in order to stay balanced. Simple concept, but one that we're typically not taught. And so this is what I'm seeing, just a huge explosion of this. And honestly, we're kind of at the pre-end, at the pre-beginning of the tsunami that's coming around some of this stuff as things start to get back to whatever normal looks like going forward, right? So there's going to be a lot more of this type of issue and a lot more discussion around this.
That's a beautiful summary of what you're seeing. I so appreciate that. And I know people will be feeling seen just in what you've shared. So thank you. And I agree. I feel like because I had a cancer journey of my own, I always relate the pandemic to that experience. But of course, on a global scale, where the pandemic, we were like in survival mode and like just getting by. And now we're coming out of that. And that's what we have like more space to really process like, oh, wow, what just happened? Who am I? What is this world I'm in? And I think you're right that, yeah, we're just at the tip of what's to come.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of people realize that, oh, wait a second. if we could all survive for 2 years and stay home and not, like a lot of stuff that we took for granted we didn't do, and we're okay. We could work from home, or and it's not ideal for some folks, but there's a way to do it, right? And so I think it just opened up people's eyes to know that there may be a different way. And that's a good thing, maybe a different way to do this or a more optimal way to do this. But then when you have people or organizations or structures try to take us back to what it was before without really factoring in all the learning we've had, it doesn't quite fit anymore. Do you know what I mean? And so it can be a struggle for some folks. And then even just getting back to whatever we think of as normal. I know for me, it was too much information, but I had to figure out how to wear pants again, right? It's like
Yeah.
pants. Oh yeah, not too much, not short. Figure out how to wear pants, make small talk. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like I just like it was just weird. It's like, oh, this is. I thought I was good at this before, but so there's all that transition back into some sense of what healthy new normal looks like, right? And even that, which can be fun, but it can also be stressful because it does require energy to kind of figure out the new rules.
I love where this conversation is. And I feel like this is a great place to kind of introduce this me factor, which you have a book about. What is the me factor? And how does that support us leaders in this state that we see ourselves in right now?
So I'll kind of give you the story of how this came about. The me factor is my own personal system for making sure I stay balanced and overcoming burnout, keeping myself away from burnout in the future. And what happened was, as I started to kind of figure this out, I captured it because I didn't trust myself and just keeping it in my head. I had to make sure I had it somewhere external to me so that I could refer to it. I actually first made a few recordings, some CDs, and back when we had CDs, right? So, and I used to do a lot of driving, and so I'd listen to these CDs of myself, telling myself this is what I need to do now while I was driving, because I'm kind of reprogramming my brain from the other stuff that I had. Before that, I was a pretty significant workaholic, pretty good codependent people pleaser, and so I've burnt myself out a few times where it was not good. Fortunately, there were no lasting health effects, but during one of those times, I legitimately thought I'd had a stroke, and that's scared the hell out of me, right? And I know it put all sorts of strain on my relationships, and I wasn't doing as well in my business and my work life as I needed to. My health wasn't, even though there was not anything broken, it wasn't good. It was sub-functional, right? And so I put this system together to help me. It's like kind of like policies and procedures for a business. You don't want to trust yourself in the moment to make that decision. If you have a system or a policy procedure, you just follow the policy procedure, and typically that gets you to where you want to go. And so that's what I put together. I started seeing that when I was talking to my clients, 98% of them had something that was off based on my system. And it's like, oh, so it's not just me. This is more general. This is something that other people can get to. So I started teaching it to my clients, and when I did workshops and stuff. And then people said, "Oh, well, you got to do you have a book? Where can I find this?" I started giving them my CDs, but they still wanted books, so I wrote a book. So now I got a book. But yeah, basically, it's a system. So it's a system to make sure you have all of the important me factors, as I call them, included in your decision making process, how you function in your life. And there are 7 me factors that are internal to help you look after yourself. And there are 5 external factors, really priorities to help you manage your world externally. So if you're in a relationship, that is one of the factors, right? How do you like where does that relationship stand in priority with everything else, say like work or the kids or your extended family or whatever, right? So those are all the external factors, and having those factors in order, in the right order, is really, really important. If you don't have those in the right priority order, you're going to struggle. You're going to feel burnt out, and you're going to piss people off. Okay. And so that was the first thing I figured out. And then I also understood that if I'm not in a good shape, then nothing around me is going to work well. My performance is not going to be good. My relationships aren't going to be good. People and things I care about will likely suffer. And more likely than not, I'll end up like resenting them because I don't have my own stuff together, right? And so I figured out that, okay, there are some internal things that I need to look after, such as my physical health, my emotional health, my social connections, sense of purpose, my spiritual well-being, finances, getting all those things in order. And when I have those things in order and I have a system to make sure each one of those is fed on a regular basis, well, I feel fed. And if I feel fed, then when I'm dealing with my partner or I'm dealing with my kids or I'm dealing with work, there's more of me to show up to do that better. And I have more capacity for patience, grace, as well as, creative problem solving. And so it's just a system that I put together that helps me to do that. So it's really battle tested in the lab of my life, but it's also shown up with so many people that I've worked with over the years that they found it very, very valuable. What I've also done, particularly with the book, is I've put together what's called a decision matrix. So it's an actual way of making decisions to include everything that is important. And you assign numbers to these things so you can actually see which is a better decision or what it might cost you if you make that decision. So it's kind of a cool system.
It sounds like a powerful system and one that everybody needs. So we will have the link in the show notes so everyone can go check that out. I appreciate that you put it into book format.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So as you were saying this and also pairing it with some of the audiences that I know that you're working with, which are some pretty like tough individuals. Some might look at these folks and be like, how are you ever going to get like gang members and like top level oil and gas execs and these other communities that you work with to change or to buy into that because those environments feel like they're rooted in a very like old, maybe more masculine but traumatized way of being and worldview. So I just want to leave some space here for you to comment on like what are you observing about in those humans. And I ask that question because I sit in circles. So I run a lot of circles and I find that the more diverse that circle is, the more rich and juicy the conversation becomes. And that there's always these threads that start to form amongst people, regardless of their life circumstances or what they're going through. So anyways, can you comment on how this work is landing with these audiences and your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So the gang members, let's talk about that. That was early in my career. I haven't worked with hardcore folks like that for a while. But when I was working with them, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our socioeconomic status, our family history, the money we have, the education we have, we're humans. We all have that need to feel connected. We all have that need to be understood and validated. And I think whether you're in sales or you're in leadership or management or whatever it is, the first thing you want to do is connect. And when you connect with people and they feel that you are interested in who they are as a person, not as a label, then you have an in, right? Then you have an in to be able to suggest things. But I'm under no illusion that I fix people. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation for me to have on myself. But I can plant some seeds. And if I am in a good relationship and I have a good connection with the individual, those seeds, I can plant more seeds and those seeds have a better chance of growing. Humans, all of us have the capacity to change, whether it's about whether we choose to change or not. But what I know is that when people are less traumatized, when they're less stressed, their capacity for change goes way up. So a lot of times when you see people who look like they're stuck, whether it's gang members or old school, like, leaders or whatever, maybe look at that with a compassionate eye and understand that this may be their way of survival, maybe misguided, maybe actually hurting people in the process, but they may be trying to figure out how to get through. And this is the only way they know for now. But one of the central pieces of my work, particularly the me factor and all the work I do with burnout and stuff, is this idea of what I call OPS, your optimal performance state. And it has to do with state management. If we are stressed, if we're under attack, if we feel tired or hungry or angry or something outside of our normal, well-rested, happy, well-fed state, our performance goes way down. So our performance in the way we think goes way down. Our performance in sort of defaulting to dysfunctional habits or ways of thought or actions or responses goes way up, I guess, right? We just default to the negative stuff and we can't see the options. So when you are working with these tough populations, connection is number one, right? Because that helps to reduce the overall heat of things. And then you work on helping people feel more soothed, like how you started this interview today, grounding us, reading that beautiful poem, just kind of helping everybody mellow out. That puts us in our OPS, our optimal performance state, to be able to learn, to be able to take in information, to be able to consider options. And so a lot of the folks that you see who are, maybe doing damage in the world, right? We know that hurts people. And so they're hurt. But when we can soothe their nervous systems, when we can help them to get their feet under them, when we can help them to know that they're valued regardless of where they come from or whatever else they may have done, that does open up the space for them to then consider some different options, hopefully healthier ones, right? The ones that are healthier for them and healthier from the people that are surrounding them.
I so appreciate you bringing in this lens of compassion when we're seeing behaviors that are causing harm, and to just look at it through that lens, not negating that, I don't think what you're not saying is that that's okay, that people cause harm.
Right.
Yeah.
No, not a free pass.
Yeah.
I understand where it comes from. Just because I understand it and I validate it doesn't mean you get to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You still have the responsibility to be a decent human. Yeah.
Yes. And how we relate to people matters. So we can still hold people to account and be compassionate.
Absolutely. Which is harder, right? It's harder. It's much easier to just sort of, oh no, I'll excuse them and just kind of roll with it, make ourselves and everybody else a target, or just write them off. Do you know what I mean? And oh no, these guys garbage. They're not real people and whatever, right? It's much harder to have that nuance, to be able to say, okay, I can understand where you're coming from. I can identify with you. And you're not allowed to do that. I use this analogy a lot, actually, in my work. It's the analogy of the Old Yeller, the movie, the story, right? And for those listeners who don't remember, right, it's basically, a kid grew up with this little yellow lab pup, right? And grew up with a dog they called dog Old Yeller, right? And the Old Yeller was this kid's friend and went everywhere with them. They lived out in the country, and so they'd go exploring and stuff. And one day, I don't know if it was a wolf or what it was, some rabid animal tried to attack the kid. And Old Yeller defended him and fought off the animal, protected the kid. But in the process, Old Yeller got bitten and was developing rabies. And so this is the whole thing. Old Yeller was developing rabies, and he was now becoming a threat to the kid's family, to everybody around. They loved Old Yeller. They thought of him as a family member. They were really sad, and they still had to put the dog down. So they had compassion, but they still had to do what they needed to do to protect themselves and the people around them. And so it's that kind of courage that I think is needed more today. But a lot of people don't even have the template for it. They don't know that that's okay to do, or that's a way to think, right? So this is why I like planting these kind of seeds with people, so they know that no, it's okay to understand and not let bad behavior continue.
I didn't know that story about Old Yeller. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
So I have two more questions for you. I think it'd be lovely to leave the person who's sitting here with us in circle today with something to think about in terms of how can they take this wisdom that you're sharing with us and apply it into their own lives to bring that more positive energy or more self-care, whatever it is. But what would you say to that person who's with us today?
Well, there are two questions, I guess, that I use to help focus me in. The whole idea of state management, staying in your zone, is really important, because if you're in your zone, everything else just flows from that. If you're not in your zone, then it's a lot of work and you're not going to do as well. Like, you put in a lot of effort, you're stressed out, you're not doing as well, right? So being conscious of where you are, being conscious of how you are doing in any moment or any day of the time is really important. So One of the questions I use, this little tool I use to help me pay attention to that is this working for me? It's a question I ask all the time. Is this pair of shoes working for me? Now I've had to answer that. No, it's not. They're really tight. Why am I wearing these shoes just because I bought them? Just because they're expensive. Why am I keeping them? Right. And I had to get rid of them. I gave them away. Right. And got something comfortable like Skechers or whatever. Right.
Mhm.
But we can ask that about a relationship. We can ask that about a thought process. We can ask that about a habit of behavior because a lot of these things are just sort of things we've always done. So we always keep doing them. They're unconscious to us in a lot of ways. And so by asking that question often about everything, we now bring that into consciousness and then we can make a decision about it. Do I need to trade in the shoes, right? Or do I need to buy another pair? Or what do I need to do? So that's one question I think is very, very powerful. Is this working for me? The other question is, how can I make this work for me?
Mm.
Right? So some things you just need to get rid of. Other things you can't. Either you want to hold on to them for a while and work with them, or you can't, right? I mean, we can't like the pandemic, we can't get rid of it. Like it's not something that we have a choice with. Something that happened. But by asking, how can I make this work for me? All of a sudden I become a gold miner. I become somebody who's digging through the dirt, looking for that nugget, looking for where the value is so that I can make this situation, this experience pay for itself. I don't want to have to go through suffering and all these other things and not get anything out of it. I want to be able to get something out of these things I go through, a new idea, a new relationship, different way of approaching life, something. And so that's the other question is it can be a very powerful question because then it doesn't matter what comes at us. We don't have to be afraid of it. We know it's just this is the price of the lesson I'm going to get or whatever thing that I'm going to get. There are lots of people who have had what other people would consider tragedies, and they themselves considered tragedies at the time. But when they apply this particular approach to it, they are very happy they went through it. They're thankful for the experience because it helped them get to another level, sometimes a new career. In my case, burning out 2 or 3 times helped me like get to the book, right? The me factor. I know that some of the stuff that I've gone through, the difficult times that I had in my life, they've helped me to become a more compassionate person. It really helped me in connecting with people and in my work. So, if we can get this lesson eventually, we can probably start to shorten the timeline on that. And just by asking this question, how can I make this work for me? We don't get lost in the intensity of the negative experience. It's still going to be there, and you still have to make space for your emotions on it. But then you can also start gold mining. What else is there? What can I take from this? What's going to help me come out of this situation better prepared, stronger, different mindset than I went into it, right? And then all of a sudden, it takes a lot of the sting out of the experience in the moment, but you also have a benefit as you come out of it.
I love that. I love those questions. And as you were talking, I was also thinking about the application of these questions, not only to the individual, but to big challenging issues that we're in right now around reconciliation and, systemic racism and unpacking these systems. And if we as cultures, and I'm like as white people too, could be asking ourselves like, oh, is this working for me? Living in this way that's so monotopic, is that really working for me? And how can we make this work for us? Like it kind of expands the mindset around it. And instead of remaining in fear of change, to really get excited about what's possible when we can frame things in just this positive, beautiful way that you have with these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of things we can come out of this whole experience with that are positive and more beneficial to ourselves and other people. Yeah, the mind's a powerful thing, right? And if we have one way of seeing it, that's all we see in terms of the options and the possibilities. I was talking to somebody, one of my colleagues, and I said, for like hundreds of years in athletics, no one had ever run a 4 minute mile. And then once somebody ran the 4 minute mile, somebody ran it the next week and somebody ran it the week after that. You know what I mean? Like it's just, oh, I guess this is something we can do now, right? And for a lot of human history, at least in certain parts of the world was flat. until somebody said, well, maybe it's not. And they say, oh, I guess it's not flat anymore. You know what I mean? Like, so our minds are extremely powerful in terms of being creative, but also extremely powerful in the ways that they limit us if we let them. And so these two questions for me are ways to open my mind so that I can look for other possibilities and just be open to what else can come.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing those with us. I know they are going to be super beneficial for me and and our listeners. So as we close out, Dr. Gans, this show is for change makers, people that are out there really wanting to make a difference in the world. And I imagine a lot of the folks that you serve are in that position as well. This whole idea of being the change, I was inspired by Gandhi way, way back. And, he has that phrase, be the change you want to see in the world. When you hear that phrase, what is it that comes up for you?
We think of it as walking the talk. Like, instead of saying, the Bible says this too, right? Before you try to get the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own, right? Basically, right? And so there's some of that. So I get that, walk the talk. But for me, what it really means is I want to add the energy that's missing. So I look at that and I say, what is missing here? A lot of times it's compassion. And so maybe I need to add some more compassion. So I might walk in compassion when I try to create that change. Or maybe it's positivity. Maybe it's objectivity, whatever it might be. And so for me, when I see that, when I hear that, that's what I look at. Okay, what is going on here? And I, maybe analyze the situation. If I want this to change, what would be the most beneficial change? Well, if people are in conflict, it's not more conflict, right? It's peacefulness. So I show up with some peacefulness. If people are not understanding each other, maybe it's understanding and validation. So I show up and try to bring that. Like, I try to have it internally and then show up as that in the moment. I don't just like, okay, I'm going to give you some understanding here now, right? It's like, no, I'm just going to try to be a more understanding person, first starting with understanding myself and who I am and being real with myself. And then I show up in that space and I can just naturally be a more understanding person. And so to me, that's what it means when you want to be the change you want to create in the world.
There's such an embodiment aspect of what you're speaking of. And it feels like all of your work is really about that. It's like, okay, we want to lead. How are we leading ourselves as well?
Always starts with us. It's an inside job, right? From the inside out.
Yes. Yes. Love it. Oh gosh, it's been such a pleasure to be here with you, spend this time with you. I'm so grateful for the path that you've chosen and the work that you do to support yourself to do this work and to keep going with it, because it is so needed. And as you say, it's so needed all that much more. And leaders like you that are showing up and offering your life experiences in a way that supports other people is just beautiful and powerful, and just so much gratitude for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on and sharing your listeners with me in this platform. This is awesome. I love the work you're doing too, because I feel the love and the compassion and the inclusiveness, the richness that you're creating in this community. And I love it. So thank you for having me.
Hi, Changemaker. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. There were so many beautiful life lessons in this dialogue. What I love is his commitment and dedication to the importance of the me factor. And included in that is looking at our lives holistically. That leadership at work encompasses our personal relationships, our physical, mental, spiritual, financial, and emotional well-being. This is a model that Western cultures have struggled to adapt, and it seems he is helping us to decondition our ways of being so we can increase our capacity to lead and create change while getting the very best out of this life. It's so inspiring and hopeful to know that he's out there doing this work. Here are the questions that he leaves us with. The first two are to support you to restore inner peace and gain a sense of empowerment. Is this working for me? How can I make this work for me? And then the last question he leaves us with is a question for change makers. What change makers ask themselves when they show up into a room, which is, how can I bring the energy that is missing in this situation? I love this question because it requires intentionality, presence, and deep commitment to being the change in every moment. You can find a link to Dr. Gans's book, The Me Factor, in the show notes. I will see you next week for a solo episode where we're going to talk about a topic that has transformed how I show up in the world. All right, Changemaker, that's it for today. We so love your support, so please go to humconsulting.ca/donate to contribute financially to this show. Thank you so much if you're one of our monthly or one-time donors. We love you and appreciate you so much. See you next week, Changemaker. Ciao. I'm now passing the talking piece to you. If you feel called to put your voice in the circle, please head to humconsulting.ca/podcast and share your story there. I cannot wait to hear what has come up for you as you have listened to what has been shared here today. I wish you love and joy beyond your wildest imagination. Thank you so much for being here in the Circle of Change. I also want to express my gratitude to the following peeps. Circle of Change is recorded on the ʷəŋən territories, and I am so grateful to live on this land. Our opening and closing music was created by the talented E-Roll Beats. You can find his creations at erollbeats.com. And special thanks to my coach, Mary Chan of Organized Sound Productions, for bringing this podcast to life. Until next time, ciao.